Hello, this is C.Hicks for Class N582, Teaching Strategies for Nursing Education, with Professor Mason as our instructor. And today we're going to discuss mental imaging when teaching motor skills. We'll also develop an interprofessional case scenario describing how interdisciplinary teams work together in order to provide the best patient-centered care. We will also describe a clinical situation that could reasonably be translated into a simulation, and we'll describe the best simulation for that situation. We'll discuss what psychomotor and cognitive skills that we would hope for the learner to achieve, as well as envision the role of the educator in this simulation. And then we'll include information that we would definitely want to see in the debriefing. We will construct a scenario that could be used as the basis for a debate in an undergraduate nursing ethics course. And I'll also prepare a learning activity that reviews the instructional methods that we've discussed in this module. So, starting with mental imaging, this is also referred to as mental practice, and it's a process of visualizing a task without actually physically doing the task. This is a helpful alternative for enhancing motor skills for individuals with mobility deficits that are commonly seen in neurological injuries. When developing an interprofessional case study to show how interdisciplinary teams work together for patient-centered care, we've come up with Mrs. H, who is a 78-year-old woman who lives in a long-term care facility. She has developed a stage 3 pressure ulcer due to immobility. Mrs. H is currently receiving IV antibiotics and is being monitored on weekly wound rounds for wound healing by the nurse manager and the dietary staff. Mrs. H weighs 102 pounds and has not been eating any of her meals. She complains that she doesn't like the food being served, and a certified nursing assistant has reported finding numerous snacks found under her pillows. So with this case scenario, the nursing staff as well as the dietary staff would have to collaborate in order to make sure that the patient's nutritional status is sufficient enough to promote healing with this stage 3 pressure ulcer. A clinical simulation would be most appropriate to reasonably mimic a patient going into septic shock. This is the clinical situation that I've chosen. It would be expected for the learner to achieve psychomotor skills of responding expeditiously when obtaining the patient's temperature, applying the blood pressure cuff to obtain a manual blood pressure reading as well as a manual heart rate, visualizing or visually observing the respiratory rate, and obtain a blood draw for accurate diagnoses. The learner is expected to use critical thinking and clinical reasoning by identifying signs and symptoms of sepsis, such as altered mental status, cyanosis, hypoxia, and oliguria, and to be able to interpret lab values. Now, my role as an educator will be to allow the student to use trial and error during this simulation to determine their strengths and weaknesses in responding to acute situations. During debriefing, we would identify the appropriate signs and symptoms of sepsis. We would identify the actions of the students that was implemented well, and we would also discuss room for improvement on how to ensure the safety and proper care of the patient in this scenario. The statement that would be constructed for debate in an undergraduate nursing ethics course would be an ethical debate that could be posed in the undergraduate nursing ethics course would be to describe ways to overcome the lack of trust that African Americans have towards the healthcare system. This is a systemic problem stemming back to the Tuskegee experiment. And it continues to this day, which we saw with the recent pandemic and the reluctancy for African Americans to receive the vaccination. So that would be a great source of debate there. The game that I have selected is a crossword puzzle. I am going to include this with the upload so that you can see the puzzle. But other than that, I would like to thank you for your time, and you have a great evening.